Sometimes to know where you are, all you have to do is close your eyes and listen. When people of faith raise their voices in song, it tells a lot about who they are. Their heritage, and how their religion is woven into their daily lives. Yet even when various congregations are guided by the same religious ideal, suggesting that the same God created all people, there is often a tension between the desire to follow that teaching and the way they worship on Sunday.
Hello, I'm Marcy Davis. Faith and community, the public role of religion, aims to deepen our understanding of the diversity and vitality of religion in America, its people, institutions, and ideas, and their influence on our life together. The series is based on a study, the largest of its kind, that included interviews with religious and civic leaders, congregational members, and public citizens in metropolitan Indianapolis, a study conducted by the Polis Center at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. An earlier series, Religion as a Window on Culture, illustrates the variety of religions that are practiced in the United States. But what we sometimes overlook is the diversity we find within America's predominant religious tradition, Christianity, its complexities and relationships to the larger culture and to other religions. In looking at this tradition in Indianapolis, we hope to provide a window through which other American cities can be viewed. With a population of 1.5 million people, Indianapolis is big enough to be diverse, yet small enough to comprehend. Through 11 episodes, Faith and Community will introduce you to the public role of religion.
"11 o'clock on Sunday morning, what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others called the most segregated hour of America. Nearly a half-century later, it's still true.
The gaping wound in American life for 3.5 centuries, since 1619, has been black and white racial, and beyond that even, red and white, Native American and others. And there's guilt about it. There is a sense of barriers set up that cut right through the heart of black and white Baptist, black and white Methodist, and so on. So it's on the conscience, and I think that enough people now, in contrast to some decades ago, have been reached by the fact that this is not congruent with what their faith is supposed to be about.
Most churches in America are either nearly all white or nearly all black. Catholic churches are the exception, mostly because the majority of their membership is drawn from a specific geographical area. Some believe that black congregations differ from those that are predominantly white, but the differences aren't always based on race.
African American congregations are very much like white evangelical congregations theologically in terms of their emphasis on Scripture, on being born again, on the role of the Holy Spirit, having a kind of conservative piety. But they're historically quite different from white evangelical congregations in how they respond to political issues and questions of justice, and should the church be involved in various kinds of political and economic reforms and that sort of thing.
It's possible that we actually need to make distinctions not so much on race as on class. But for example, in Los Angeles, there are 2 or 3 African American churches which are extremely large, in excess of 10, even 20,000 members, which are basically upper middle class congregations. those congregations have a great deal in common with other upper middle class congregations that are white. And in fact, those congregations oftentimes join together in terms of political issues that they're supporting or opposing.
Historically black churches and predominantly white congregations have very different expectations about their roles in society.
The roots of most African American congregations, which would be Methodist, Baptist, in our century, Pentecostal, originally rose up in slave circumstances. They were subversive. The plantations would arrange for a white preacher to come in, and then Sunday afternoon when he'd leave, then, as one of them said, we sing the old-timey songs, and then we get the real message.
Ever since colonial times, the historic black church has been in the political mix, supporting social and political movements.
We're getting ready to demand jobs.
And initiating economic development that has reached far beyond the front steps of the church.
African American preaching is open to address a variety of issues.
1,300 sanitation workers are on strike.
And so therefore, one is not surprised if social and political issues are explored within the sermon. What happens to the poor? What happens to children in public education? What happens to neighborhoods, the value of property, social cohesion?
The opportunity to be Christ-like, to walk the streets, to rub shoulders with people who are hurting.
And so it is this understanding of being communal, of being concerned about the community as a whole, that then shapes how the issues that are public are often ones with a communal frame to it. In some white churches, people are very concerned about what they see as the separation of church and politics. And so if someone wants to talk about political issues, it should be done in another setting.
Today, most separation is voluntary because where people worship is based primarily on family history and tradition.
Segregation in housing patterns in America militates against an easy fusion. People don't live next to each other across racial boundaries very much. Secondly, cultures are very deep, and as they get deep, it's very hard to make these moves.
Despite those historical and contemporary obstacles, there is an expectation that religious organizations may hold the key to easing racial tensions in a community. Local leaders often turn to clergy for help in resolving situations that have become explosive.
You can't write the history of efforts to racially reconcile without the funny paradox in that religions are leaders on one level and are foot draggers on the immediate local level.
Even so, some congregations are taking a closer look at the disconnection that still exists between whites and African Americans when they gather for worship. The questions involve both how to bridge the racial divide and whether that should even be the intention. The answers vary widely. 3 models found in Indianapolis reflect the different responses to the challenges of racial integration. In the first model, some congregations find their most profound religious experiences within a worship community that consists entirely of one race. A second model is practiced by those who find ways to collaborate on interracial worship and learning experiences, but do so outside the scope of weekly worship services. And finally, some congregations have chosen to embrace racial integration as an organizing principle of their worship experience.
To create interracial congregation is easier said than done. There's a number of pastors and leaderships within congregation that want to be interracial. They've committed themselves to it, but they haven't been able to create it or sustain it. And this is, I know black congregations that want to be interracial, and I know white congregations that want to be interracial, and I know a number that have succeeded in doing that, but I know more that have failed. And so the attempt to do that cannot be underestimated, and the challenges of doing that should not be minimized.
New Paradigm Christian Church is a congregation founded on the premise that racial diversity is an indispensable aspect of the Christian faith.
Jesus said the number one commandment was love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and the one next to it, love your neighbor as yourself, was the second. And upon these two relational commandments, all of the law and the prophet hangs.
John Fuller established the church because he was frustrated with his ministry in a mostly white, traditional congregation.
We were seeing individuals that we consider to be honest seekers, not fitting into the standard traditional church, and trying to figure out where they fit in and where they belonged, and do we have to do this cookie cutter type of thing?
Its members are working to live up to the name they chose, trying to create a new model of what a Christian church can be, inclusive from day one.
We didn't invent this. This was what the early church was about. The early church was about Jew and Gentile. How we have gotten away from that just is beyond my imagination, and why we think that we should perpetuate that in our practices. And the statement that Martin Luther King made years ago, that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour across America, that was a statement not of approval, but it has continued to be practiced. There's integration on the football field, basketball court, in the education system, in the government, at the workforce, and then yet we come to worship separately. People know that there's something wrong with that.
Acceptance is their model.
The people that are not welcome at New Paradigm are those that are racist and bigoted and are closed-minded about who God's people are. We're very upfront about that. Now, if they want to change their paradigm, then they're welcome.
Yet some members say that New Paradigm's racial mix is beside the point.
Many people would think that I'm a liberal looking for an opportunity to be more involved with blacks. And honestly, that isn't the truth at all. I'm just a real conservative looking for people with the same conservative views as myself. And I found it here.
We have not reached our goal. We are a biracial congregation, interracial congregation, but by far we're not multiracial. And we believe that since God created all mankind, that's what heaven will be like, and that's what we should be striving for. And I long for the day that New Paradigm is not unique, but it's the norm for us to understand that Jesus Christ is more important than our racial background, cultural groupings, that Christ transcends all of that.
In some cases, two or more congregations acknowledge that they have profoundly different traditions and outlooks, so they come together to focus on what they have in common. A faith-based attempt at racial reconciliation took root in the early 1990s.
Our original conversation came not long after the Rodney King Los Angeles riots. And there was a readiness I think on the part of people to do something.
The pastors of two large congregations, one white, the other African American, stepped forward.
We said to each other, Indianapolis is a potential powder keg. How can we be a redemptive factor? So we asked for a meeting with the mayor.
The most visible result of that meeting became the Celebration of Hope.
We talked about how we could help each other, how we could encourage each other, and how our congregations could possibly come together. So we began to plan a service between the two congregations at a neutral place at the 11 o'clock hour. The 11 o'clock hour being symbolic of the most segregated hour in American life.
What was unique is we shut down on Sunday morning. And we deliberately brought our congregations together. And we found that was something that had never been done before in America.
We began to see that there were other people who were interested in becoming a part of it.
After the first few years, the celebration expanded. To accommodate greater participation, the service was moved from Sunday morning to Sunday afternoon. Recently, the founding organizers passed on leadership duties to a new generation of clergy.
Our vision is that it'll transform the community. Nothing smaller than that. That our vision is to transform this society into a compassionate, inclusive, Christ-like community where there are no racial barriers.
We understand the complex issues that still exist that could seek to divide or keep apart members of our cultures and members of our communities. We need to address those seriously and have serious debate and dialogue on these areas to make sure that we can move to the ideal of reconciliation.
The challenge? Move beyond a single big event into programs that transform lives, one at a time.
If we're not careful, that type of event can be an opportunity for us to rub shoulders and to hold hands and to sing "Let There Be Peace on Earth." And then after that big event, we go back and lead our segregated lives.
Participation in racial study circles is an effective way of increasing understanding one-on-one.
You get below the surface and discover the real feelings and hidden prejudices that all of us carry, and have an opportunity to confront those and deal with them and develop some deep, lasting relationships, which we think are the heart of what it means to live in community together.
And you don't even think, but it's because of my race.
There can be surprises, such as suggestions for the antidote to violent crime.
Every white person in the group filled out the form saying, first of all, we need more police protection. And every black person in the group filled out the form saying, we need better schools, education, housing, and job opportunities. And then when we shared around the circle and saw that, we thought, we don't look at this issue the same. And it was an opportunity then for each person to listen to the other side and hear the wisdom in what they were trying to say.
5 years from now, it's our expectation that Celebration of Hope will be responding to the needs of every population of our community, so that wherever you see a culture, their specific issues will be addressed within or under the Celebration of Hope umbrella.
The difficult point that we are dealing with at this point in our history is that people have also recognized that there are often benefits to people having relatively segregated spaces in which to express their religiosity and form their communities.
How we gather on Sunday morning has to be within our own choice, because we need to, that's where we get our personal, our individual enrichment.
For many congregations, integration in worship is not a goal. But it's not a question of shutting the door on other races. Instead, it is a matter of respecting the deeply spiritual experience that is informed by a particular culture, and in this case, choosing not to become more integrated.
It's important that all of us have a common objective to reach the world for Christ, to let them know about the love of God. But at the same time, we have to be honest or just accept the fact that there's some folks that I can reach better than you, and there's some folks you can reach better than me. But what needs to happen is that they get reached.
For Walker, the bottom line is worship is an intensely personal experience, and people should feel free to choose the place where they are most comfortable.
The reality is that there's still a great deal of racism that exists in this society. And it is comforting to be able to go to a place where you can be affirmed, where you can be assured, a place that people sing the kind of music that you sing, who experience worship and express themselves in worship in a way that will not cause people to turn around and sneer or stare at them. I know that there are people who feel more comfortable in a multicultural setting, and that's fine. But don't say because of my need to feel comfortable in a multicultural environment that everybody has to be.
Walker cites the New Testament story of Pentecost. when Jesus' disciples began to speak in tongues.
Persons from every nation who were gathered in Jerusalem that day were able to hear the gospel story and to take it back to their homes. And when you look at Peter and John and some of the other early apostles, they saw their ministry to the Jews. They were very effective getting the gospel preached and shared to persons who looked and talked like they did. The wonderful thing about it, Paul, who wrote probably 3/4 of the New Testament, had a greater influence on Gentiles who also had to be reached.
All of our marriages, we give to you right now.
I believe that the gospel was meant to meet people where they are. And the objective to the gospel is that a person can understand the love of Jesus Christ and is communicated to them in their own language. I need some noise. I need to have hands clapping and guitars playing and drums pounding and, whatever vehicle that gets you into the presence of God. That's what you should use. And I don't think that you should feel guilty.
Sometimes what you hear can tell you a lot. The history of black and white congregations in Indianapolis suggests that coming together in worship is complicated. While devout people might accept the truth of the oneness of God's people, their worship might not reflect this belief. Congregations deal with this disconnection in a variety of ways. Some follow a path of intentional integration by seeking their spiritual renewal within a fully integrated worship community. Others come together on occasion to worship in ways that don't sacrifice either side's valued traditions. And there are faithful congregations, both predominantly black and white, that, for important and long-standing cultural reasons, have chosen not to pursue integration. Understanding those models and recognizing there may be other approaches will begin to explain why the notes look the same on the page but sound so very different in the pews. If you are interested in additional episodes or more information, visit our website at faithandcommunity.org.